So we have to bear in mind that certain giant waves come along to us from time to time, from age to age, particularly to give enlightenment and therefore relief from difficulties and pain. And so naturally, such people, such as, let's say, Buddha, Jesus, Ramakrishna, and so on, they would have naturally been surrounded by people who required what we would interpret as their help. That's why they have come. They have come to try to restore some sanity, to restore some harmony. We are told in the Bhagavad Gita that from age to age, such giant waves come whenever there is a decline of harmony or dharma or morality or spirituality, whatever you like to call it, because it all equates to a disharmony somewhere, a discord. And so where do we fit into that? It's okay for giant waves to come and do this, but what about you and me? Well, I suppose the ideal answer would be we have to sit where Ramakrishna is sitting or where Jesus is sitting. And that would be a little difficult because these are pristine examples of absolute purity and infinite wisdom. We are not so wise. So the first thing we have to do is assume a position of humility. And we get that naturally by accessing in our worldview the full glory of what's in front of us. And that's how we start. We start by having an inner shift where we have a song, an internal song about all the glories that is around us. An appreciation for all the things that are good. God made the world and saw that it was good. We have no right to see it in any other way. And when we come across people near and dear to us, and we realize that they need some assistance, and that we know from our own experience that it lies in spirituality, we have to be careful that what we're talking about is not theoretical, but that we are a living example of this. It's just to use an example, it's no good telling people, broadcasting the idea that if I'm on a ship in a storm, that there is a lighthouse at a certain geographical location. That doesn't help me. What helps me is being in the presence of the lighthouse, having the visibility and the warning that the lighthouse has. And so I think that's the Irish saying, it is better to light a candle than curse the dark. But we have to be the light. We have to be the example. So the first thing we really have to do is attend to our own spiritual health and welfare, our own spirituality. It's otherwise there are mixed messages. Now, perhaps we are not models of perfection either, and yet we know the theoretical answer that will help somebody, that will change their thinking. Then we simply have to direct them to the examples and sources where we got our inspiration. It could be from teachers, it could be from historical personalities such as a Jesus, models, in other words, of spirituality, the mystics. How do we even prove that there is an entity that is enduring, that never changes, something that has a governing position in the universe, is responsible for the rhythm and order in the universe? Well, the answer to that question is because we have examples of such people, the mystics, and it happens in all religions. Anybody who takes up a spiritual path has access to this because there's internally inside us something that is moving us toward perfection. If there was a child in front, you might put it in this terms. See, life is a journey. You are the traveler. We are the travelers. We come from that being and we're going to that being. Now, what is that being? Well, if you want to give a form and shape to it, we can call it a personal ideal or a personal God, some entity that has come and forms such a model and asks us to follow that model, to imitate that model through various paths. The suggested easy path for this day and age would be love of God, love of that ideal, pouring all your energy that normally is dissipated as anger or jealousy or lust or greed or any of these things, and rallying the emotional response and putting it in a sweet and loving way. And the result of that is we access the honey, if you will, the nectar of that object that we are pouring our whole devotion into. This is called grace. And yesterday, when we were discussing the purpose of meditation, we gave this definition: it is to access this divine grace. If we become full of this, if we become overflowing with this, then it overflows to others automatically without one word being spoken. So the ideal is for us to be a living example, living model of the ideal that we want others to follow. And we, no doubt, we wish them to follow it because of our love for them and because of our concern for them. So our motive is quite correct, but then we have to be cautious, because if you have a penetrating vision and see the unity of existence, as Vedanta comes to this conclusion about, then this unity of existence means that there is nothing, there's no imperfection anywhere in the world. It only looks like that. And it looks like that very convincingly, so that we see a world of suffering and we are moved toward. Now, the highest models of compassion, let's take Buddha, for example, so the great silent one of the Shakya clan, the great Siddhartha, Gautama Siddhartha. Buddha was the embodiment of compassion, because his whole formula was, look, you're all suffering. I recognize this, I see it. And suffering is a very real thing. It's an actual phenomena. But you see, we know why you are suffering. You're suffering because of attachments. You're suffering because you feel that life is not fulfilling. And you think the possibility of it being fulfilling is always there. And you see, this analysis is still with us. And some people might say, no, I'm leading a good life. I'm not suffering in any way. I'm not physically suffering. I'm in good health. And I have, my financial position is solid. No, I don't have any arguments with relatives. No, I am quite happy beavering away in my life. But then there's still this ideal of attaining some form of peace, some form of happiness. There's a recognition that some kind of disturbance will be there if we are thoroughly honest. And Buddha would have recognized this, that there is physical suffering, there's also emotional suffering, psychological suffering, that people are often in a state of depression. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita starts off with this, with a situation where somebody is depressed, clinically depressed, to the point of a nervous breakdown. All the symptoms are there. So we have to take this as a good starting point. If we're optimistic, we have to say, anybody who's in trouble, it's a good starting point, because there's no way to go down further. The only way is to go up. And we have to have the faith, the conviction, that means the unwavering conviction, that if all is one spirit, then what looks like a struggling entity is actually on the surface. Just as on the surface of an ocean, there will be storms, there will be disruptions, there'll be one wave bashing mercilessly into the other. There'll be boats being tossed about mercilessly, but underneath it, the storm is gone. Even in the spatial world, we'll see that trees are being blown down by storms. Recently, I came back on an airplane, and it was in stormy weather, but above the clouds, not a trace of it. Absolutely not a trace of it. The sun is beaming away. blue skies are there, the clouds are below us, and the whole storm area is below that. So we have to get to a position, a transcendent position, not just theoretically, but in actual practice. And that means we have access to the inner wisdom, which is always there, the pure spirit, which is always there. We have to make this analysis, therefore. The whole purpose of Scripture, which really is a thorough tale of somebody else's experience. Let us say that Scripture, let's say that Christian Scripture is the experience of prophets and ultimately the New Testament, Jesus, that I have seen the Father, and he who's seen me has seen the Father. It's a living experience. Have you seen God? Notoriously, Naran had asked Ramakrishna, have you seen God? It's a question he seemed to have asked all those people who should have had the answer. Dominant people teaching and preaching spirituality, and nobody really could say with conviction, yes, I have seen. Only Ramakrishna would have said. And he said, not only have I seen, but I see now, and clearer than you standing there. And then, of course, the saving thing, you also can see. Why? Because if I can do it, you can do it, anybody can do it. The infinite possibility, therefore, for problem solving, if you want to put it that way, and providing internal solutions is already within us. It's already with us. We just have to shuffle ideas around and find the 20th elephant. You know the example of the 20th elephant, where a father leaves 19 elephants to be divided up between a few sons, and the first son can get half of the 19 elephants since he's the eldest, but 19 is indivisible by equally, and so you're left with, 9.5 elephants, let's say, for the one son and so on. What use is a half an elephant? You can't pull a tractor with half an elephant, and you don't want to be cruel. What will you do with half elephant? But you see, the wisdom of the Father was there, and the wisdom of somebody understanding the difficulty in the problem comes along with a whole herd of royal elephants and says, I think I'll solve your problem. Do you mind if would you like to borrow one of my elephants? That makes 20, and make your division. And so they make the division. The extra elephant is left over. Please give it back to me. So we have to learn in an adventurous and sporting way to shuffle possibilities around and to look at things from different directions. And Scripture helps us to do this. So now, last night I told the story, famous story in the Chandogya Upanishads. It's there in the seventh section, if you will. And it deals with Prajapati's instruction. Prajapati, the Lord of all creatures, the embodiment of wisdom. And he has these two separate children, if you will, Indra and Virochana, but all two people with two different approaches, inherently different approaches. And he tells this message to the same thing, but the question is, and I'm now referring to a question that came to me by email also, and that is, what is the self? What is the nature of the self? Now, it seems self-evident to most people about who I am. Of course, when we go into the personality development courses, such as the Enneagram and so on, we see the behavioral side of the self, what we call personality. And the whole idea about telling you all of this and researching it and going through a workshop that reveals a behavioral characteristic that is helpful if we deal with it, not helpful if we don't, is to say that it's not just this personality, but persona being a mask, some entity sits behind it. And so the inquiry goes, who am I? Because the only thing we take for granted, absolutely, and are absolutely certain about is, I exist, I am. See Descartes' answer, even the biblical answer that the burning bushes are, who are you? You know, I am that I am. It's an entirely Upanishadic, Vedantic kind of reply, divinely inspired reply. Now, the same kind of thing will apply when we ask the eternal question, even in Greek philosophy, know thyself, know thyself. Descartes said, I am, you know, cogito ergo sum. See, I am because, if you summarize what he was saying, because I recognize I have an awareness, a self-awareness. When I think I'm aware of this thought process going on, that's a wonderful analytical kind of statement, but we forget all about it because when we deal with the physical world, the body world, where we identify primarily with an embodied entity and not understanding that the body is instrumental to our own self-discovery, then we get caught up in the physical world. Supposing the problem, the person who you're talking about has a problem with the physical world. What does that mean? Essentially, it means the waking world, the waking state. And this is where Vedanta comes up with a trump card and says, my dear people, if you think that this state of consciousness called a waking state is the only thing, the only state that we have, then this Jagrata, this realm of the waking state, you haven't gone deep enough. You haven't gone to the psychological level. This is why Western psychoanalytics, Freud, Jung, and so on, don't just stop at the conscious waking state. They go to the subconscious. And in the subconscious habit level, it comes out, only is there, it only operates by itself in the dream state. Swapna, that dream state is there. And further than that, that also goes off. And we are aware of a kind of blankish, peaceful state where no duality exists, no sense of movement, therefore no time, no sense of individualities or space-occupying entities. So no divisions and no movement and no time and no change. So now, that is also a state of consciousness that we can be aware of. And we are aware of it and able to recall it. I had a peaceful sleep. So with all of these philosophical aims, the answers to our questions then becomes, is our problem in the dream world? That is, all our worries and so on, is it in that subconscious area? Or is it concerns of the conscious waking world to do with the physical world of wars, of people insulting me, of me reacting, the world of work, the world of domestic problems, the world of problems? Then if that's my major concern, then the difficulty is I'm identifying with the body. It's very clear. A person orientated physically will have problems in the physical world. A person operating from the anxious anxiety world, of course, the one may overflow to the other, and focusing on this internal world of worry, anxiety, doubt, fear, and all of this, maybe as an effect of the first one. That area, of course, that has its own difficult problems. It's more introspective. And then, of course, if you go to the deep sleep area, as it were, then that also has potential problems, because if your solution is, let me blank everything off and go into a narcotic state where I blank everything off and everything is dull, and then this dullness will not help me either. But awareness of these three states of consciousness is the supreme philosophical evidence, if you will, that a separate entity is there, not affected by anything. For this reason, Indra and Virochana are interested to know what is the self. And so they're asking this question, and the Chandogya Upanishad is making it clear, because Ya Atma is the first thing, is self. The self, which is free from evil, that is free from problems, in other words. It's not moral evil, moral evil comes into it also. Free from old age. No. As you get older, you might wish to be free from old age, or you might welcome it. You can be now classified as a senior citizen. So you're no longer old. That's the good news. You're no longer old. You're now a senior citizen. It's a wonderful turn of phrase. You don't die, you pass away. These turn of phrase are highly optimistic. So free from old age. Free from death, because that's where old age leads. Free from grief. Free from emotional difficulties. Then what about physical difficulties? Free from hunger, free from thirst. There are people in this world who are not free from hunger, who are not free from thirst, whose desire is the real. In other words, the only thing I know is that I don't have sufficient. I don't have fulfillment. And that desire, of course, can be very, very subtle, because any external desire for an object, let us say a new house, a new car, whatever it is, as something that is material, objectively material, will really come from a subtle area of desire which seeks fulfillment. Supposing I desire to eat exotic food, it may well come from an area whereby I think exotic food will be my emotional compensation. So whose thought is the real? He should be sought him, forget don't worry about the gender issues. One should desire to understand. In other words, there's a hankering that we all have for something that has no grief in it, a condition of no turbulence of desire, something that satisfies everything, something that never changes, something that doesn't get old. He who has found out and who understands that self, that's really what we want. We understand the principle. He obtains all the worlds, all the desires. So we want to know, what is that self? And so Prajapati gradually, like any good teacher, leads at least one of them, the one that is dissatisfied with the temporary placeholder positions, wants to go deeper, 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 not finding any satisfaction in the answers. So this answer is going to be carried back to others. And so it's not just for these two individuals. But anyway, the reply is, if you really are interested in the answer, there is a certain discipline that is required. You have to go away. In this case, the text says for 32 years, you have to go away. And what will you do? You'll engage in tapas, austerities. That is a systematic strengthening of your willpower. Now, this is a dangerous area, because strengthening the willpower, as opposed to, which is the effect, as opposed to the process, which is self-control. Self-control is an internal process, more orientated toward that, whereas strengthening the will is more of an external process. And so it depends how you take it. Somebody who is prepared for the truth, the ultimate truth, will take it as a self-control. But somebody not will take it as a strengthening of will That is why you'll find in all the literature, the mythological literature and the historical literature, let us take historical literature such as the Ramayana, we have the Ravana who has strength, great strength of will. He has undergone great deal of discipline, great deal of meditation, and the rewards have come from the cosmic mind called Brahma. Nothing to do with morality because wisdom is missing. And so we require wisdom to find out the answer. And the greatest wisdom we can apply is humility. Understanding our lack of knowledge, our lack of understanding. And a part of that humility is resisting the temptation to change another person and to change the world. Because there is no humility in it. There is only egoism and pride. I alone can do it. I should do something. Now we have to make a distinction between that position and true compassion. And the compassion will lead us to the kind of analysis that the Buddha made. I see you are suffering. The suffering is caused by your desires. You might ask a question, what do you want in life? And how will you propose to get it? And whatever the answer is, will fall into the category of either the physical or the psychological, including the emotional. And that's a big error because you'll never satisfy your desires from these two areas. Of course, the other area is to give up, to go into a kind of torpid state, a dreamless sleep condition, a kind of blank. That would be another option. But that also is not helpful. You may find a fool going into the blank of deep sleep, but waking up as a fool. There's no transformation that takes place. It's not the answer. So withdrawing from a situation is not the answer. In fact, it's deemed in the Bhagavad Gita as cowardice, running away from the situation, withdrawing from it, thinking it will solve itself. So, after this, two conditions are there. One is condition of self-control or self-discipline, tapasya. The other one is celibacy, living life as a student, involving humility, involving a level of self-control that bypasses the animalistic tendencies in a person, which are to do with attachment essentially to the body. So the answer is possibly a little misleading, but testing. The person that is seen in the eye, that is the self. Simple answer. That is the immortal, the fearless. That is Brahman. That is the self that you're looking for. Now see the language, because automatically the Brahman, which is identified as an ultimate cause, that is what you're looking for. That is the self. The self is the Brahman. He was perceived in the water and in a mirror. Who is he? Is the next question. When I look at my reflection, who is that one? And the reply, that's the same one. Indeed, it's perceived in all of these other persons, all of these bodily things. Now, what Prajapati means by the self, the subject of all seeing, the representative of the Devas and the representative of the Asharas, they mistake the self for the person that is seen, not the one who is the seer, not the one who is all-seeing, not the subject, looking at the object. And so, even in the Yoga Sutras, we find in the second section that the person seen in the eye is the figure imagined in the eye. And they ask whether the image that is seen in the water or in the mirror is in fact the self. So at this stage, the pupils confuse the true self with the body. because that's where we make our most common mistake. Even though we may not assert it, we are saying, I am the body, that's my identity. I am the body. Of course, we may understand the individuality of how the body looks, and we may also understand the individuality of what is behind in terms of the personality, the behavior, the personal history. And that is why I make a little fun. I say, fear is faith in heredity. In other words, it's identification of oneself with all the ancestors on the mother's side and on the father's side, all your history that involve status, social conditioning, family background, and all of that is a genetic identification. It naturally becomes fearful because what is the difference? An animal in the jungle, let us say a tiger, and our modern day cats have kind of come from that. It's all to do with self-preservation. Every movement is built in through experience and comes out as what we call instinct. The instinct to preserve, to attack where we can, and to acquire a camouflage where we cannot be seen, where we can be hunting and knowing what to advance toward and what to avoid. It's part of a biological makeup, but the mistake is that this is also an object. It's not a subject. In other words, there's a higher purpose to it, and it is an instrument. Anyway, Prajapati doesn't explain any of this. He leaves it to people to sort out by themselves. And this is another part of the answer to your question. We have to give enough freedom to somebody for them to work out their own salvation. We have to give a suggestion. A good teacher will do that. You give a suggestion, not the answer, just a suggestion, and leave it to the other person. Please go, reflect on it, work it out for yourself. In the same Chandogya Upanishad, we have this whole idea of Satyakama, the story. A pupil is taken on, and the teacher doesn't teach him anything. He simply says, go and increase the herd. And when the bull has increased the herd to a certain number, then you come back. Your job is an agriculturist. Be a farmer, go at a distance, live alone, and do that. In other words, I'm giving you the opportunity to shuffle various ideas around by taking inspiration from your environment. You'll have to at night light a fire. When you gaze into the fire, you'll have a time to contemplate, reflect, and the answers will always come from inside you. In fact, there's nothing we can say or teach, there's no knowledge anywhere that is not already inside you. And this was Swami Vivekananda's stress in terms of modern education. And Sister Nivedita, for example, carries that on in her schools. You tap into the knowledge already there, and there's infinite possibilities in you. If you want to put it in biological terms, the DNA in the nucleus of the cell holds your whole architectural pattern. It holds everything, over 100,000 coded messages being there, all waiting to be unraveled. A kind of coiled up potential that the yogis call kundalini, something that is kundali, something coiled up. That potential is there, it's there in everyone. So what should we do? The most loving thing to do is to persuade somebody that their potential is unlimited. On what basis? Not on a physical basis. So Indra goes and reflects on this. And judging from the criteria, just to remind you what they are, the criteria will be that it is an entity, the self will be an entity that is free from effects, external effects, free from evils, free from disease, free from old age, free from death, free from grief, free from hunger and thirst, physical needs, free from desire, free from turbulence in the mind, that would be the criteria of what we are seeking. Clearly, the body doesn't conform to this. The body experiences hunger and thirst, at least that much. So, when he looks at himself, Indra that is, in the pan of water, and he understands, he says, Prajapi said, what do you see? And Viryochana comes to the conclusion, I see the body. We have to make sure the body is taken care of, is enjoyed. We have as many pleasures as we like. This is what our Creator has told us. But Indra, on the other hand, he sees it differently. So when we are adorned with our best clothes and tidy, we can see both of these. And so that is the immortal, the fearless, that is Brahman. I don't think so. And so he sees through the inadequacy of the physical theory. He sees the inadequacy of the materialist, physicalist philosophy, that we cannot find the truth of this, of our own existence. So he goes back to Prajapati, not satisfied. And he comes traditionally with the fuel in his hand, as a student is humble enough to say, please teach me more, on the basis that I don't see any answer in the physicality. And of course, Prajapati says, on what basis have you come back? I gave you my answer. And then, so he says, well, I don't find it meets the criteria. All right, go away. Another 32 years, please. In other words, in order to get this understanding, we have to do some kind of self-control exercise. We have to do spiritual practice. Then he comes back, and the next revelation is, okay, actually, in the dream sense, the dream self, he who moves about happy in a dream, that's yourself. He is the immortal, he's the fearless. That is your Brahman, that is your first cause. And of course, the implication is once you've discovered this, you've discovered the whole of the basis of the cosmos that's inherent in the answer. Brahman is a cosmological term. It's a universal term. It's not an individual term. Individual expression is Atman or Purusha or any of these terms. So, but he's specifically saying in his answer that where you're looking for the self, you're looking for the self of the entire existence. So he went forth with a tranquil heart. Okay, now I have the answer. But of course, even though the self isn't blind, like the body can be blind, or lame, like the body could be lame, or diseased, and though he doesn't suffer any defects from the defects of the body in a dream, but you can see the difficulty of saying the dream, you see, because it doesn't also fulfill the body. It avoids all the difficulties in terms of the physical interpretation, but not in terms of anything else, because he says, even though the self isn't blind and suffer all the things in the physicality area, still he is not slain when the body is slain, and so on and so forth. We understand all that, but he comes to experience, as it were, what is unpleasant even. So suffering is still there, even in the dream state. And I see no good in this. So if I'm an anxious person, I still have anxiety dreams. I still have problem-solving dreams. I still have many, many kinds of dreams. It's not necessary. There are nightmares, So it's not entirely meeting the criteria. Well, he goes back, and again he has to go and do some tapas to get the final answer. And then it comes to, this is the self in the sleep. When a person is asleep, composed, serene, and knows no dream, or all objects are gone, time is gone, space is gone, and so on and so forth. That is the self, that is the immortal, that is the fearless. Now it's interesting to see these answers, the immortal and the fearless. They go together. Something that is immortal, that something that is infinite, is immediately fearless because it's only one thing. And fear only comes when there is more than one. So that is the Brahman. Then he goes temporarily satisfied, tranquil of heart, and so on. But before even reaching his fellow deities, the Devas, he sees this danger. In truth, this one doesn't know himself that I am he. That's the problem. There's no self-awareness in it. And so, nor indeed the things here. He has become one who has gone to annihilation. I don't see any good in this. In other words, it's gone into a state of nihilism. And there's no advantage of nihilism at all. So he comes back, fuel in hand, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, he gets the answer after more discipline and so on. He comes back. So he says, O Bhagavan, mortal truly is this body. It is held by death, but it is the support of that deathless, bodiless self. Truly, the incarnate self is held by pleasure and pain. Truly, there's no freedom from pleasure and pain for one who is incarnate. Truly, pleasure and pain do not touch one who is bodiless, apart from the fact that we are not perpetually sleeping or perpetually in a dream. There's a cyclical process going on. So, how do you explain it? Bodiless is air, clouds, lightning, thunder. These are bodiless. Now, as these, just using them as a metaphor, when they arise from yonder space and reach the highest light, appear, each with its own form, even so, that serene one, that self, immortal self, when he rises up from this body and reaches the highest light, appears in his own form. Such a person is the supreme person, the supreme self, the supreme Purusha. There, such a one moves about, laughing, playing, rejoicing, etc., and so on. So the self enjoys these pleasures as an inward spectator, as an enjoyer, like somebody watching a drama on a film or in a stage. I am not on the stage. There's an example, you see. If I'm an artist and have an art gallery and invite art critics or buyers to my art gallery, thinking that they'll look at the paintings and purchase, then who is the person who is the most anxious? The person who painted the paintings is hoping he'll get a sale. He or she is wanting to give a good impression to those potential buyers, is organizing a cocktail party and all of those kind of things. Aperitif, which some people think is a set of dentures, but it's not. And all of those kinds of things. Okay, who is the person doing all the work? Who is the most anxious? That one or the person enjoying the art, not committing to purchasing, having the opportunity, I can if I want, but otherwise let me enjoy the gallery. So the witness is also the enjoyer. Now, how do you relay that to a person who's suffering? We have to take where they stand now. A good teacher will not go to that whole extent. You can see how Prajapati doesn't give the full picture. People are not necessarily ready for the full picture. Step by step, you lead them. You make a suggestion. And the way that the Vedanta does it is through this process of elimination. I am not the body. I am not the mind. And so on. And so we have to have a certain psychological insight as to where is this person at the moment and give them a little bit that is suitable for them. A good teacher will do that. But are we all teachers? No. Because there are qualifications for being a teacher. qualifications for being a student also. So, in summary, the first thing we have to do is we have to be the shining light. We have to be the product of our own product, if you want to put it that way. We have to be stable in our own spirituality. And even without doing anything, just that being like that will have its automatically effect, not just on the people who are around us, who we have a compassion for and wish to help them along and so on, but by having a penetrating vision to this conclusion that underneath everything is the immortal self. And then if we have a devotional temperament, we can use our full capacity of imagination to understand that the Lord that I love, or that personal deity, most beloved, that being is sitting right in the heart. Through all the various layers, that is that perfection that sits within. Now, when we have that penetrating vision, we have access to what is called spiritual healing. Seeing the perfection within, that perfection manifests itself and changes this world. That is why Jesus is able to make the lame man walk, to make the blind man see, to make the dead man awake. This is the secret. It's not to criticize all the evils which are in front of us and to try and make a correction. If we become a professional corrector, then we'll be occupied forever, like the story of the genie who is trying to straighten the dog's tail. They'll be occupied forever. So the dog's tail will always be curled. All right, leave it like that. Trying to straighten it out, it curls. Straighten it out again, it curls. There's no way you can straighten it out without it subsequently curling. So being a professional corrector means we have a negative view of the world. We think the world is defective, it needs improvement, it needs changing. A person is defective, they're suffering, they need to change. Well, that may be, we may see that and empathize with that. And I think true empathy comes from having gone through the same condition that that person is going through. I think it's a good fortune that we go through suffering. Without that, we can have no idea of what another person is going through. There's a great benefit for that. We can't really categorize things in a moral way. We can say the great benefit of making mistakes, of making errors, the great mistake of ignorance, the great benefit of all of that is that we know what it's like, and we know also what we can do in our own case. Another person's case may well be different. So it's a difficult question because compassion we have to have. We do what we can. Let's say, for example, somebody who has come across a tragedy. Let us say somebody suffering from bereavement. Bereavement is essentially profound disappointment, a profound sense of loss. And a person who himself or herself has gone through the bereavement will also understand that point of view. But the benefit that we have in our Vedanta philosophy is that we know the ideal principle, and Krishna brings it out. The wise don't grieve either for the living or for the dead. And that sounds very hard-hearted until we realize we're not actually wise. We grieve because we are not wise. If we had this wisdom, we would see this totality of existence, this pure spirit everywhere, in every circumstance. There's a wonderful section in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter is there, which is worth going through a little bit, just the beginning, because the very title of this chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, tells us something that gives us the full, complete answer to everything, because it's termed as the royal or the sovereign science, the sovereign secret, the Raja. See? So, Raja Vidya, Raja Guha, the sovereign science and the sovereign secret. It gives us a relationship between what we can call God. Philosophically, that is called Saguna Brahman. That is Brahman that seems to be conditioned by time and space, function or causality. And so, Sri Bhagavana Vacha begins like that, Idam tu te guhyat atman. The Lord said, to you who do not look for faults, there is a secret in itself. So, what is the precondition for this revelation of knowledge that Krishna is going to freely give? He says, I'm giving it to you who do not look for any faults. So now when we try to help people or see a person needs help, we have to put in this caveat. Are we seeing a fault? If we are, then we are ourselves at fault. We have to rather see the glory of what is there. So to you who do not look for faults, I shall surely declare that the most profound knowledge combined with realization. It's no good having knowledge without the realization, knowing which you will be released from all the evils. Evil meaning the unfortunate conditions, subhat, all the, there are these two things, sukha and dukkha. Dukkha, all the things which are not plain, not harmonious, things which are disturbing, things which ultimately are painful, and so on. So Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, Pavitram Idam Uttamam, this sovereign science, the sovereign secret, the supreme purifier is this. Now he's about to tell us. Realized by what? By direct perception. There's the evidence. In accord with Dharma, that is, it gives you harmony. Very easy to practice. Everyone wants something that's easy to practice. And it's also imperishable. It's nothing to do with things that come and go. Nothing to do with things that decay. People without faith in this teaching do not attain me. But return to the path of this mortal world. Everything is in terms of a cycle. All this universe, maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina, all this universe is pervaded by me in my unmanifested state or form. Think about this now. When we look out on people, places, events, anything that seems to be problematic, we have to pause and understand it is all pervaded by this divine. It is all infused, it is all occupied by the divine. So all beings exist in me. It's like, you have a big space. Everything is inside the space. But I don't abide in them. And he changes it because it's difficult to understand. It is inscrutable. So he turns it back. Nor do the beings dwell in me. Behold my divine yoga, my divine inscrutable maya, this world of appearance, bringing forth and supporting the beings. Why is he saying this? Is because that ultimate self is neither inside nor is it outside. It is not only pervading everywhere, but actually the everywhere doesn't exist. And we only understand that when, through our own direct perception, it all disappears, and only then one reality remains. Bringing forth and supporting the beings. Myself does not dwell in, that is not limited by them. And as the mighty wind, he gives an analogy, as the mighty wind moving everywhere ever rests in space, know that even so do all beings rest in me. What a wonderful picture this is. And at the end of the cycle of all beings, well, we're experiencing our cycle that Prajapati also indicates. We're experiencing waking, dream, dreamless sleep, waking, dream, dreamless sleep, waking, dream, dreamless sleep. Like three balls being thrown up in the air from behind a wall. We don't know who's throwing them, but it is only that entity who's not only witnessing, but also expressing these things. Waking, dream, dreamless sleep, red, orange, blue. And then there is the cycle of birth and life and death. All of us are involved in this. But then there's a universal cycle, animating my total nature, Prakriti. I send forth again and again all the multitude of beings, helpless under the sway of nature. Nor do these acts bind me. I am free. For I remain like one indifferent and unattached to them, and we should also emulate that, I could add. Presided over by me, because I'm simply standing there. The whole of nature, in the form of, to our local perception, things that we see and hear and touch and taste and so on. This nature produces all of these kinds of variations. It's just like the waves in the ocean, the moving and the unmoving. Because of this, the whole thing revolves. This is a different way of looking at things. In order to solve any problem, we have to shift our point of view from a conventional one. What a pity, I'm suffering, the world is wrong, people are against me, I don't know any solution, this is a history being repeated, I feel miserable. All of this self-speech, this monologue to ourselves, has to be changed by shifting our point of view away from a kind of sense of imprisonment where we come to a position of freedom. The ways of the ignorant are described in two stanzas. Avajjananti mam uta manushim tanam asritam. Fools disregard me dwelling in human form. He's talking now about a Ramakrishna, a Krishna, a Buddha, a Jesus. When we recognize the human form, your question was, how would Ramakrishna view it? So we have to see, first of all, Ramakrishna is a unique manifestation dwelling in human form. It is this eternal, condensed as it were, in a human form. How else will such an entity help us? Except appearing as, how else will it work if the ocean does not express itself as a giant wave? Being unaware of my higher nature as the great Lord of all beings, of vain hopes, of vain actions, of vain knowledge, devoid of discrimination, they truly possess the deceptive nature of Rakshasas and Asuras. A person who doesn't catch it and doesn't really absorb it, even despite repetition, is really of the nature of the Asuras and the Rakshasas. Because the alternative is, the only way I can deal with life is to involve myself in immorality or to involve myself in the ignorance. And that only brings further suffering, is the difficulty. So we have to get somebody to shift their way of thinking. And the way of the devotees or the devoted ones is different. The great soul ones possessing the divine nature, they worship me with single-minded devotion, emphasizing the path of devotion. Worship me with single-minded devotion, knowing me to be the immutable, I never change, and the source of all beings, that is the transcendent. The individual God that we worship is the same as the transcendent Brahman. There is immanence and transcendence, and we have to see in both. In Ramakrishna's language, two sides of the same coin. There is the Nitya, the eternal, and then there is the relative, the Leela, on the other side. And the idea of looking at things as a Leela, as a play, is a shift in our understanding away from, poor me, the world is difficult, to a position where we say, the Lord, full glory, everything is good. And you quote, as we always quote, Julian of Norwich, all shall be well, and all manner of things will be well. And she's saying this in the midst of Black Deaths happening twice, in the sense of all kinds of social turmoil in the 14th century. Glorifying me always. Ramakrishna gives that formula. What is practice? Practice is always lovingly repeating the divine name. Always, constantly. Because repeating the name is the same as the entity being present. And singing the glories always, internally singing the glories. These two things constitute practice according to Ramakrishna. And then that leads to detachment, being detached. Being detached means whatever activity I do, I cannot register it to me in my own effort, and therefore all the fruits of our activities are not mine. I can give them to their true owner. So, prostrating before me with devotion, ever steadfast, they worship me. Prostrating means I have the humility to submit myself to you completely. I am yours, totally, is the devotee's position. And so it goes on. Others, again, performing the knowledge sacrifice, they worship me in various ways. As what? As the one, as the distinct, or in manifold forms. In other words, away from a conventional way of thinking of this entity. I repeat what I said last night. The cultural understanding of that would be some entity outside and away, remote from us. Maybe handling things by remote control, and we leave it, God is in his world and all things are well. Yes, until things go wrong. Or that's a very immature point of view, a kindergarten point of view. God is not a problem solver, not a supply agent. Treating him as such is a mistake. Bring him or her or it intimately into your circle. Bring that transcendent into the immanent, seeing that glory is everywhere. Having the eyes to see. When we look at a plant, it's not just a plant. It's not just a garden dismissed. We see it every day. No, every leaf contains the full totality of divinity. Every eye that sees contains the full totality of divinity. Learning to see that is very important. And then ultimately seeing the connection that this totality is there, that there's a connection in us and everything and everybody, seeing that glory in everything, primarily in the heart, and then as everything. Wherever we look, the only thing we can see is that divine, that source, that Brahman, that Purusha, same thing. Wherever we look, learning to see it as the 9th chapter, 10th chapter, and so on of the Bhagavad Gita, where the glories, divine glories are told. Krishna is not saying in, he's saying as. I am this, I am that. Not I'm in it, I am. So we have to learn to see things progressively in this way, the divine in everything, through everything, as everything, beyond everything. Anyway, we leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.